Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this discussion on trade and tariffs. Um, my name is Jonathan Friedman. I'm President and CEO of World Trade Center Utah, and just grateful to the Chamber, to Mary Catherine Perry and the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce for their partnership in putting this webinar together. And of course, to Senator John Curtis, Congressman Blake Moore for joining us. Mary Catherine, let me hand it off to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mary Catherine Perry, the Vice President of Public Policy and Government Affairs for the Salt Lake Chamber. We are thrilled to partner with the World Trade Center Utah on today's trade and tariff briefing. We know that tariffs have a ripple effect across our economy, impacting businesses of all sizes and industries. That's why organizations like the Salt Lake Chamber and the World Trade Center Utah play a critical role in ensuring Utah businesses can compete in the global marketplace. We too are grateful for Senator John Curtis and Congressman Blake Moore for joining us this morning. Thank you all for being here and for your commitment to Utah's economic future. Thank you, Jonathan. Back to you.
Thank you. As we see changes coming out of Washington at a fast clip, both the Chamber and World Trade Center Utah are really laser focused in order to inform and be a resource to the Utah business community. We're, again, just really appreciative of our congressional delegation, especially these two gentlemen that join us in particular. It's important that we get the best information out of Washington and that we can inform them with the best information out of Utah. And just stay in that close collaboration. I'm really so appreciative that that the Chamber and World Trade Center Utah have such a good relationship with our delegations. So with that, let me pass it off to Senator Curtis.
Well, thank you, and a big shout out to World Trade Center and the Chamber, both good friends of me and of our office. Hello to my landlord, Congressman Blake Moore. Good to see you, Blake. Probably more information than you need, but I found a very cozy home in Blake's basement where I reside. And if I can tolerate the landlord thing, things will work just fine.
Hasn't missed a payment yet.
So listen, let me jump in and share a few thoughts, and to the extent that this is a less formal and more casual conversation, I think that would be good. And I'd love to hear what Congressman Moore, what he would add to this. But I'll just say, I was in Congress 7 years ago under Trump 1, and still have scars from the tariffs, particularly small businesses. And I remember the phone calls, the letters, the pleas of our small businesses. And I think one thing in particular I still remember is a woman who had one product from China that she had been sourcing for years. And her whole business was built on one product. She had no ability to change supply chains or to rely on other products. And the tariffs were just hugely punitive on her. And that taught me at the time that the tariffs are more punitive. The smaller you are, the more difficult it is to navigate tariffs. It's not that we don't feel sorry for large business, but they have more ability to switch supply chains, rely on different products, and shift that burden around. And a lot of our small businesses don't. So as a result of that, part of my new Senate responsibility is meeting with the nominees, President Trump's nominees. And there are a number of them that are connected either directly or indirectly with tariffs. And as I met with them, when they asked for my vote for nominee, I brought up tariffs and asked each of them to think about a way that we could protect our small businesses on tariffs. And I proposed a few ideas. So for instance, a slower on-ramp, giving small businesses a longer time to adapt to the tariffs, exemptions. In Trump 1.0, we had exemptions. And I think I was able to secure some good commitments, not that they would do them, but that they would bring up my points with the president and in these discussions. And now that the tariffs seem to be going in place, I'm having the same discussion again with them. I did have an opportunity to meet with somebody from the Trump administration yesterday. Because it was a private meeting, I won't share a lot of details, but I will tell you, when I mentioned a particular business in Utah that would likely be put out of business with a 25% steel tariff, that person's response to me was, well, you know, the president, he starts high and he ends up low. Well, hopefully for some of our businesses that's the case, but I don't think what's being taken into account is how do you plan, right? How do you, if you think it's going to be a 25% steel tariff, but the president might bring it down, and you're thinking about, well, I got to lay off employees based on that 25%, it makes it very, very difficult to plan. So I'll be penning a letter to Commerce, Howard Lutnick, to reemphasize these points. As these move along, I would encourage businesses to reach out to not just my office, but to their representative's office as well. Tell us your individual situations. That helps us convey those to the administration. And I would love to hear any suggestions that all of you have for how we navigate this. And with that, I'd love to hear from my landlord, Blake Moore.
Well, okay to jump in, Jonathan? Okay, since you know, I follow all of like the all of the requisite regulation on land, like landlord and tenant, or housing provider and tenant responsibility. So I would never disclose that, but since the good senator has, so there's these basement apartments, they're English style basement apartments. I renovated a place and it worked out perfect on timing, but I have decided that I'm going to get a little placard and put it down in the lower unit where John lives, calling it the lower chamber, just as a little joke about, we always get, we're just a lowly house over here. We're the people's house, but
I think in law that might be considered harassment, that you may be crossing a line.
Thank you. I always appreciate Senator Curtis's perspective, because he's been there before, having experienced this. This is my first time going through this type of tariff. It's turmoil. It's tough. It's really hard to deal with. So I'm not afraid to call it that. And 100% aligned with John's understanding, approach, and thought process on this. Let me add a couple of real quick things. First off, I'll be remiss if I don't at least mention, brief meetings that I have with World Trade Center and the leadership team that you have here have led directly to conversations. At the start of this Congress, a few month and a half ago, I was able to get onto the trade subcommittee. So trade is a part of my committee on Ways and Means, and I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get on it, because it was actually the last person that was, the last spot available. That it worked out such as the shakeup was happening within the membership. So I was really excited, just because I know how much interest there is on this, and it's led by World Trade Center. So I had a meeting with them a few weeks ago and directly took those conversations to the staff on the trade subcommittee. Ideas about stockpiling, ideas about how we deal with exclusions and things like that. So I've been able to get briefed and more up to speed just off of the education I've gotten from World Trade Center. So it's very much appreciated. Here's the part that I'm really frustrated with. That small business owner that's been doing, that one niche product from China, all the other stuff. We had this great plan with GSP to be able to divert and start encouraging people to go away from Chinese manufacturing. And then it's failed to be renewed. My frustrations with that. The Democrats threw a wrench in it at the very last minute, when it was a very bipartisan bill and it looked like we were going to get it sailed through. And then they stalled it, and the end of the Congress happened. And but that's the type of stuff we have to. So we still have to figure out with my Democrat colleagues how to deal with TAA, if that's going to be their red line on not allowing GSP to go through. That's going to be a very difficult policy matter to get through. But the point that I'm trying to make is, we haven't given you the options and the incentives and the carrots for you to make the decisions that we all know we want to. We all generally do want to be able to move away from being so reliant on Chinese manufacturing to some degree. And then we take away the only carrot that we've given you for a while. So your frustration is definitely felt within the delegation, from us representatives back here, and just know we're working on trying to navigate that. As far as we know right now, the exclusion process that existed in the first Trump administration, they've been very clear. We're not doing exclusions. We're doing these tariffs. This is how we're going about doing it. We don't know if that softens. I can't imagine a world that it doesn't soften, but we're going to continue to not just push for it, but communicate why there are very nuanced need for this to some degree. So exclusions. I love the tariff concept. I understand why President Trump says tariffs my favorite word. And then he'll back off and say, wait, no, God, country, family are supposed to be my 3 favorite words, but then tariffs my favorite word after that. But really, I think he really means that tariff is his favorite word. He loves it. And you see the benefits from it when you get the leverage points that he's able to do on some of our foreign partners. What happened with Colombia plays really well into American citizens' minds. They're like, oh, he put out a tariff threat, and they immediately came to the table. Like, I want to use that as much as possible. I appreciate that approach. I'm okay with putting a March 4th deadline on the China or the Mexico and Canada. The only problem is there's more to deal on Mexico right now with immigration. There's less to deal with Canada. Canada, they're already working with us on all these things. We're almost painted into a corner at this point on a March 4th deadline. So that's coming up. And I don't see how that one plays out. The negotiations with Mexico seem a little bit more like, okay, there's more wiggle room, and we can do that. So we avoid that. It's going to be really, really tough if these two, Mexico and Canada, play out and they're fully implemented on March 4th. And then if Europe comes online with similar tariffs, that's also going to be very difficult. So that's what to watch for. I'm just probably being overly, maybe a little pessimistic, or as John would say, grumpy. But I'm just trying to be real with you all as far as like what we're seeing. I hope we can nuance this better from all those angles, exclusions and the way you leverage this for, immigration, important policy matters that we need with some of our neighbors and allies. So, and then the last thing, we cannot over rely on, but we're going to get so much extra revenue from tariffs, because we know ultimately where that revenue comes from is directly into from the American economy. We are working very hard not to overtax the American citizens, and we had some significant wins this week, and that's on a tax side that I'd love to share with folks in another setting. But we can't just resort to then increasing costs across the board for Americans and be happy with that revenue. There needs to be a more nuanced piece to that as well. So let me pause there, as I've probably given a more frustrated and grumpy look at things. I'm just trying to be realistic with you all. What John had mentioned, Senator Curtis had mentioned.
Please.
That I think it cannot be emphasized how important his work with these nominations was. I got to watch it from afar. I didn't, never really involved in anything, but from what I was seeing, like, there was so much substantive communication going from Senator Curtis and his team with these new nominations that made it very serious. We're watching, we're involved, and we want to see good partnership from the administration, and they did a good job getting through all that.
Maybe if I can just jump in, Jonathan, first. I will say I got a lot of criticism because so many people wanted me to be a rubber stamp of the president's nominees. But by not being a rubber stamp, it forced a dialogue with them and build a relationship that I wouldn't have otherwise had. And I was able to develop a much more a deeper relationship with the nominees to where I can communicate with them now. And they were dependent, quite frankly, on my vote, and that put me in a really, really good position for Utah.
Thank you for saying that. I think it's one thing that we admire about both of you is that you're prepared and willing to have dialogue that's sensible. So, and also just appreciate both of you saying that, that you understand what this means to Utah businesses, that some may not survive. These are livelihoods. These are real, living and breathing companies. So thousands of people depend on them in our state. And of course, tariffs, as we know, are inflationary and will make everything more expensive for Utahns at large. Senator Curtis, you also mentioned something that resonated. You said that tariffs are more punitive for small and medium-sized companies, and I suspect that Troy Keller, who I'll hand it off to here pretty soon, will probably speak to that. That we believe that is true. That because we don't have Fortune 500 companies in Utah, we have a more diverse and resilient economy because we're mostly built up of small and medium-sized enterprises. And however, that has, we're susceptible to things like tariffs where it's hard for our companies to reallocate large amounts of capital and say, well, we're going to take a factory from China and put it right in price. We just don't have the ability to do that or pay firms large amounts of money to navigate loopholes and carve outs. So maybe with that, Troy, let me introduce Troy Keller. He is an attorney in Salt Lake, also works with World Trade Center Utah as our policy advisor. Very knowledgeable on the topic. And Troy, I'll turn it to you.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. And thank you so much, Congressman Moore and Senator Curtis. And I don't know how much time you both have. If you're going to be around for a minute, we'll probably throw some questions your way, but we understand if you will not be.
I have until half past the hour.
Okay, great. Well, maybe while we have you, Jonathan, do you think it's okay if we, kind of accelerate the Q&A and do that first? Okay. So we'll do a little bit of Q&A.
I've got 10 more minutes myself.
Okay, fantastic. So as the Q&A is already rolling in, we've got some specific questions on Canadian lumber. Maybe let's start there. I think Congressman Moore, I think you mentioned how Canada is, that one's a head scratcher, the tariffs on those, which President Trump, I think just earlier this morning, reconfirmed would be coming indeed next week. I think there's some yesterday, last couple of days, there's been some question about that. What options do you think with the Canadian side versus Mexicans? Is any different, or are they kind of going to operate together, do you think, in terms of how that rolls out?
I'll let John have the last word here. I think so. Right now, it's important to remember that the key aspect that we should all be able to galvanize around is the enforcement side of this. I think that is the best opportunity we have to lessen the burden of what could come after March 4th if these do get the tariffs get fully implemented. China has not, but we've had issues on dairy, right? Specifically on USMCA with dairy. They need to address that, and hopefully the pressure that's mounting before this this potential full launch could alleviate some of that. In my opinion, that's the bandwidth we have to make some good negotiation with Canada. It would be less on immigration and fentanyl. From my assessment, I feel like Canada is doing their fair share on the fentanyl issue. We could always do better. Both sides could always do better on that on the northern border. But that doesn't seem like the opportunity there, more so than the year-long issues we've had since USMCA has been in place on enforcement of things like dairy. So let me pause there.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say there's some who feel like that Canada is subsidizing their lumber market. I think that's debatable. It comes from the fact that they're using a lot of public lands where more and more here in the United States, they're not harvesting wood on public lands, but private lands. I wish I knew better if the president was just using this as a threat and then going to back off it. And I think you have to consider that's a possibility, but I very well understand, as we said before, the difficulty of trying to plan a business, not trying to decipher if it's a threat or if it's a reality. And I wish I had a good answer for that, other than just to hang in there, and we'll see where this thing eventually settles out.
Well, I think we have some more questions, but I just want to just say we all kind of share that stress and anxiety as to what will the world look like really in 6 months. But the difference, having both of you on and you being able to share and spend time with us, helps us know that we know all there is to know. I mean, frankly, I think there's a certain amount of of comfort in that. Cold comfort at times, but I can't say how much we appreciate it. Okay, there's an interesting question. There's a lot of questions coming through. So if I don't ask yours, don't take offense. I'm just trying to catch the ones that pop up. And so one is on tourism, and I've heard that a few times. Utah tourism is very important to Utah. Obviously, tourists, there's not they don't have to pay an import tax when they arrive, at least not that I'm aware of. So it's not like tariffs directly affect them, but it sounds like and this is the third time I've heard this, that both Canadians and Europeans are saying, well, as part of our way to kind of fight back against tariffs, we're not going to come to the US. And I don't know, I think again over time we'll see what statistics show. Is that something that that you have heard in your offices? And in either way, is it something that you think we can manage for states like Utah where tourism is very important?
I'll just jump in. I think of all the worries that I have heard, that one's not elevating up above the noise. And not that it's not important, I don't mean to imply that. I think the greater concern is on businesses and planning and the impact of that. We have such amazing assets in our state. I think we'll survive anything from a tourism perspective. I don't mean to downplay it, but that's not been I'll just say it's not been a topic in my circles.
Yeah, I would agree on that level of where we've heard it. But these types of sentiments though do take root. You'd have to look at data, because we've had this sentiment before, and European residents that don't particularly love President Trump's approach. So did we see it from there? I think it's important to look back at the data. Although I will say though that I've never had, we had a very big charm offensive from our Canadian partners. Some of their Ministry of Foreign Affairs and some of their parliament members would come down and they made special trips to our offices to come and make sure there was a good, strong relationship, of which they were met with absolute open arms and good, positive relationship. But yeah, I would hate to see it kind of get trickled down into that type of sentiment. But it's real. Like, you saw what happened between U.S. and hockey. I've never known like this massive rivalry between U.S. and Canadian hockey. So it does flare up. We're not dismissing it, but I think you can look at the data and see if it's been a problem in the past.
So a question, we've talked a fair amount already on Mexico and Canada. A few questions have come in on China, and as you may have heard this morning, President Trump mentioned that he's planning on adding another 10%. So as everyone knows, a few weeks ago, a 10% increase was made on all China imports, whether or not they were subject to exemptions. And then this would be another 10% on top, so kind of 20% on top of the 301 tariff. So so a number of questions have said, is there, any views, any insights in terms of how the China relationship is going to evolve? And again, we realize that's, crystal ball a little bit, but would love to get your perspectives from each of you.
John's our Chinese speaker, so I'll let him go first.
I would say be very careful here. And what I mean by that is some of these tariffs are quite random. Some of them are hard to predict. I think it's been very predictable for a long time under Trump 1, even a Biden administration, and now Trump 2, that we have serious trade issues with China. And some of those issues are differences in regulations. And I would just point out, we're subjecting U.S. businesses to regulations about emissions. We expect U.S. businesses to have human rights standards. We have standards on OSHA safety that we don't that China doesn't on their companies. So outside of the Trump tariff discussion, there is quite a bit of noise about what I would say leveling the playing field with China. I also think a lot of businesses got a really loud warning 8 years ago, and then through COVID that they you do not want to be dependent on China for your supply chain. And thankfully, a lot of them have diversified to some degree. But I would tell you, with or without President Trump, this is something that everybody needs to watch and be aware of, because I think this is not an indiscriminate tariff that the president's putting on. This is based a lot more factually on the differences in standards between the two countries. I would also say that there's been a classification of, I can't remember the exact dollar amount. It's under a certain dollar amount where we just waive the tariffs because they're too hard to collect. And they're coming after that, and they're putting a lot of pressure on FedEx and these major shippers to collect on that. It's stunning how much of the volume actually comes through in cheap goods coming from Taiwan. And look, I'm as guilty as everybody. You get online, you want a cover for your iPhone, you want, I mean, almost anything, and it's stunning how cheap it is. But we do need to realize, wait a minute, this may be made by Uyghurs in China. This is made without any standards of human rights. And so I think as soon as they figure that out, everybody whose small businesses depend on these products coming in and have not been tariffed, I think they're going to be tariffed.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add the de minimis debate.
De minimis, thank you.
De minimis
Yes.
being, it's $800. And you see a lot of stuff come in at $799. Like, it has been totally taken advantage of. That's what, so this is an area that, like, you won't see for the trade subcommittee, or the trade aspect of Ways and Means. You actually have some more collaboration in Republican and Democrat than you typically have in other areas. Like, tax is going to be a big battle over the next few months, but like trade, we usually align a little bit more. De minimis was interesting. The Democrat approach to de minimis actually mirrors almost exactly what Trump just executive ordered. The Republican de minimis was a more nuanced approach. It was a little more tailored, but still aggressive. And that's kind of what Biden had approached. Like, it's all over the place. And so de minimis has been something that there's obviously interest in it, and we need to address it. I even kind of got after a family member from finding out that they bought something so cheaply off of Temu. I won't buy, fake purses for, when you buy a fake watch or something, like I had done when I went to New York as a kid. Like, we have to change our behavior as consumers a little bit. And the de minimis is a way we can actually promote better approach. So I'm more supportive on something like this than some of the more other just blanket 25% tariff pieces across the board. Our concern from our side is, as things ramp down and maybe we have a potential ending of conflict in Ukraine, and that those things are not as tight, I think you could see the administration get even more aggressive with China than they've already announced. And I think that's kind of what Senator Curtis was mentioning. But again, I'm a sole South Korea missionary, and we have a free trade agreement. So I feel like I'm doing my part. Senator Curtis, we just haven't been able to get that Taiwan free trade agreement. I'm not saying it's his fault where he went on his Latter-day Saint mission, but I just want to point out that we've done our part with our good agreement with South Korea. I'll end it there.
Hey, I want to thank you both for the perspectives on the China situation. That is actually super interesting and informative. I also wanted to just note, and apologize for mentioning it earlier, but Congressman, when you mentioned the trade work that you're doing, we all know you're on House Ways and Means, which is amazing for the state. I don't know how many people appreciate you're also on the trade subcommittee, and though it's a subcommittee, it's a powerful group there. And then Senator Curtis being on the Senate Commerce Committee has jurisdiction over a lot of these same areas. So we're so grateful to have both of you on. There is maybe one more question if you have time, but if not, we understand.
Let's try to sneak it in.
I'll let Senator Curtis handle this because he usually answers them better. Thank you all.
See you,
Thanks,
Blake.
Congressman.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. So, Senator, a company in Cache Valley, Campbell Scientific, they build instrumentation that is used all around the world, and a really great company there. They mentioned one of their concerns is the retaliatory tariffs, and you meaning like as soon as we levy something, maybe the foreign jurisdiction is going to say we're not going to stand for that. We're going to hit the U.S. back. I've heard Trump say before that no, that's not going to work. We'll just hit them even harder. Any perspective on I don't know how the vibe is in DC on whether that's how we'll handle that kind of issue.
I think we all need to buckle up for retaliatory tariffs. We saw it last time in Trump 1.0, and I think we'll see it again. It's hard to predict how the Trump administration will respond to that. I might just say, I know that's not a real thorough answer, but let me just give some general thoughts and advice to everybody. I've been trying to monitor the questions as well, and I can wrap some of them up into a couple of points. Please pass along to us what you're experiencing. It does help. We then bundle those up and pass them along as we get windows of opportunity, whether or not I'm sitting with Howard Lutnick or the president himself. And so the best way to do that for my office is curtis.senate.gov. There's a place there to send in your story. I suspect if you go to Blake's Congressman Moore's website and you're the congressman, you'll find the same thing. And I can promise you can count on us to advocate for you. If you heard my opening comments, that's been on my mind, and at every window of opportunity, not just me, but Senator Lee and the other members of the House delegation. I don't want to say we're on this because that would imply we got this figured out, but I will say it's of great concern to us and our staffs. And we don't take lightly that we represent you and that this is a big deal for all of you. And then the last thing I'd say is let's do this again. I think, I'm not getting into the state a lot. I think I've been in Utah 5 days since Christmas, but this is low-hanging fruit. And to the extent that just communicating to you, I noticed one notice, like half of it is just like at least letting you know what we're seeing, even if we can't fix it. Happy to do that and do more of these with you. We've also got our local team. I know Lori, my state director, has been watching this, and you're welcome to reach out to my state office and meet with my staff as well. And we'll get through this. We'll weather this, and just know that we're cheering for you and want to represent you the best we can.
Senator, thank you so much. If we could all, just 300 of us on the call could applaud, you'd hear a lot of applause. So thanks
very much. All right, best to all of you. Thank you.
And so now we'll move to the next section, which is a panel with some great companies and with some experts at World Trade Center, and just to preview that a little bit, I'll just make a couple comments. I think a lot of the most important things have been said by our elected officials and by Jonathan and Mary Catherine, and in particular on how Utah is hit in perhaps ways that other states aren't. Other states have their kind of sets of issues and challenges. So it's important that we convene with the Utah businesses like is being done today. And so when we talk about how to respond, I just wanted to note one way to frame it is you think about 100 years ago, and when FDR came in, that was a moment where the country was in a bit of a crisis, and a party swept into control of both the legislature and the executive branch, and that led to changes that were transformative for the nation. And people have views on whether those are beneficial or not, but we are still living with those today, and not just kind of on the social program side, but businesses as well. A lot of the structures, the regulatory structures that the businesses operate today were set in that kind of transformative moment, and a lot of those happened in that first 100 days. You think of the Securities and Exchange Commission and our public markets, all shaped right in that moment. Our banking system also as well. And so a big question is, are we living in one of those today? Is now an FDR moment? Every once in a while you'll hear people ask that. In we've had prior elections as well. People will raise that as an FDR moment, and these changes that we're going to still be kind of living with 100 years from now, for good or for ill. And I think that's impossible to know at the moment. But if we are, and if that is the case, then the trade policies, I think, will clearly be the pieces that we look back and say that that's what changed the most significantly in the world's economy, and how we operate in the U.S. and in Utah changes because of that. So how to react? We see companies like Apple announcing they're going to invest $500 billion in the U.S. As a way to pull back from China and from other countries that they're in. And we are, I think, over the course of the next few months, as the trade policies roll out, we're going to see more and more of those types of announcements. In Utah, I was glad to hear the senator and the congressman mention how much feedback they've been getting. I think, as many of you are aware, the World Trade Center Utah has also started and did a survey, which immediately received feedback from over 100 companies who shared the challenges and changes that they're facing. And so on the panel today, we have a couple of those companies, excellent manufacturers here in Utah, and we're going to hear from them. We're going to hear from Ben. Let me just do some quick intros, and then we'll jump into the discussion and have some time for Q&A as well. And I'll say, if we don't get to, we won't, because there's so many questions coming in. If we don't get to all of them, we'll do our best to kind of, create answers and provide feedback offline. So by way of quick introduction, we have with us today Kim Honeysett, who's General Counsel of Varex Imaging. And you've probably heard the word Varex, but it might not be a consumer brand like Traeger that we're going to also hear from. But they are also an amazing Utah company. They're a B2B company. When you get X-rayed at the doctor's office, odds are the components that are making that work, the technology is Varex technology. Kim has been with Varex since they went public for several years now. She's a great resource in the state and a great friend. Phil Pohl is SVP of Global Supply Chain at Traeger Grills, and 25 years of experience, floor to C-level engagement. And Phil, I think, as many people on this call have become to appreciate, he is so plugged in on these issues. He has been he goes to DC regularly, and he has been he's been very gracious with his time for the Utah community and sharing the insights that they're seeing. So we're excited to hear from them. And then Ben Collender from World Trade Center Utah is chief of staff and really standing up the FTC program here in Utah. Runs many of these trade-related programs that this group is benefiting from. So wanted to introduce those three and thank them in advance for helping us out here. So let's get started. If we could go first to Phil to share a little bit about how Traeger is reacting and responding, and what you're seeing. That would be great. And then we'll go to Kim right after that for the same. Oh, you are on mute.
There we go. I think I'm clear now, right, Troy?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Good. Troy, thank you for the introduction. A quick shout out as well to the WTC. For those of you who are first engaging with them, they have been absolutely wonderful to work with. I've gone on a trade mission with them. Jonathan has become a personal friend, and Troy has become a guide as well to us at Traeger and helping us. But I strongly encourage you to participate in the WTC. It's been a world of help to Traeger. Obviously, we are a proud Utah brand, and I want to share a few things with you. Having lived overseas, I spent about 8 years of my life with my family living in Hong Kong, understanding, if you want to say from Jordan to Malaysia to Korea, and how to manage, I would say, in that environment, that APAC environment, in all of the changes that happened back in the 2000s, in the tariffs there. Fast forward into the Trump era, and actually testifying in front of Lighthouser and understanding how to manage that tariff side as well. But what I think is most important to understand about Traeger, we actually are impacted now by almost everything that is coming across the board. So the 10% that we've got to deal with in mitigation from the first round of what Trump had to say, we also are now caught up in the 25% tariff under the steel derivatives. That's part chapter 232. So we're actually, our HST code is caught in that. So let's do 10%, 25%. And then my morning coffee, I got another 10% this morning dropped on me. So we are now at roughly at a 45% deficit as we were a little while ago. There are other ones out there that I think we should mention, and this is information that you can get from the WTC as well. But other things that are coming at us that everybody needs to be aware of is the 301 and the 303 Maritime Act that is being discussed right now, which would be a dockage fee of $1 million per Chinese vessel. That's something you should be aware of. Reciprocity, that was touched on by Troy. That's another one that's coming down the pipe. So there is a lot of movement. What I'm here to share with you is how do you take this movement into an operational strategy and say, to what Senator Curtis was saying, don't move too quickly because things could be pulsing back and forth. We've seen that happen before. So I caution groups on saying, wow, if I'm in China, I'm going to flee and move to Vietnam, or I'm going to flee and move to Thailand or to Mexico, only to find out that months or a year later that it's been redacted or retracted and pulled back. And now you have made all of these moves, costs and everything else. So the reason I say that is we at Traeger are going through very careful calculation with regard to kind of how we're laying our strategies out, looking at our factory partners. So we're having daily meetings with our factory partners to say, what can you do with regard to mitigation? Is there steel concessions that you can have? Are there opportunities for mitigation of the 10% throughout your supply chain like we did in the former Trump era? I would also say caution you and ask for your country of origin models and the move. Do we full burden move with regard to say, if I was to pick up out of China and move to Vietnam, well, in our case, we're still going to be subjected to 25% derivative. So what's that going to include? What's the full cost of that's going to happen? I think everybody needs to understand too, there are so many people talking about this. So you have capacity challenges, not only with your manufacturing, but also thinking about your distribution and logistics. As demand goes up, prices will go up in the international sector. So I would be cautious on that as well. Another thing that I talk to companies about is truly understanding or assessing the root of the tariff and how you go after it. For instance, the derivative. If you're looking at that from a steel tariff standpoint, could you actually affect it by 10%, thus mitigating it down to 15%? Is that worth it? And you have to put these into what we would call a risk model. And we have built out a risk model that now looks at each and every move that we potentially would make and what the potential ramifications would be. Now, unfortunately, that keeps changing on me on a daily basis, it feels like. However, at least it's giving us good guidance to be cautious on how we're going to move based on not only a financial model, but a time to restart model as well. I think that should be part of everyone's plan in adjusting where you think you're going to go. I would say in the beginning, when you have a 10% tariff, you can mitigate that. You can have that conversation with your supply chain. You can dwindle that down. So if that's what you're facing, as you start to get into the 20%, that becomes a greater challenge with regard to lowering your BOM cost and trying to mitigate with, for instance, concession or steel or whatever they might be offering you. As you start to hit the 30%, that's where you put the flags up to say that would create a potential nearshoring or a move into a different area with regard to that. This could all be off, everyone, if reciprocity goes through. That is a very, very big thing that everybody needs to understand. And we've put together a heat map with our group to be able to say, here's what the potential of the 42 countries that would be impacted. Here's the heat map that says, if it's 22% in Vietnam, what would that reciprocity be for us in the United States? So I caution everybody on moving super fast, yet understanding your risk model. I think building that very quickly is key to managing your business and making those smart moves. So Troy, I'm always happy to share more with you. I don't want to take up more of Ben's time or anyone else's time, but it's a very structured way of looking at this and being careful with exactly what Senator Curtis said of be careful on how you throttle this it could come back on us.
Thanks, Phil. That is fantastic, and I think we, whether on this call or after, we're going to take you up on some of those some of those offers. I'd love to see maybe a sterilized version of some of those, the heat map and the risk matrix. But
Happy to, my friend.
cool. Kim, would you yes, love to hear about what Verix is doing to handle this. I know you've got a very unique footprint and approach.
Yeah, thanks, Troy. Yeah, and I've been looking at some of the comments in the chat and the questions, and we are working through a lot of the issues that have been raised there. Verix is, as Troy mentioned, an X-ray imaging components manufacturer. We have applications both in medical, like traditional X-ray and CT, as well as industrial. So think baggage screening at airports, cargo screening at ports and borders. So a very diverse customer base that each has their unique issues. Replacing components in a medical device that is regulated is extremely difficult. And you can't just switch suppliers. There are, in industrial and medical, there are quality issues that we've struggled with in switching suppliers. So Verix is a global company. About a third of our revenues are in each of the major geographic regions. We have manufacturing in the United States, India, China, and several places in Europe, as well as the Philippines. And we started a diversification strategy when the first, well, even before the first tariffs, but we really accelerated that diversification strategy when the first round of tariffs went into effect, and at the time focused on the exemption process. So we still have 301 exemptions that are in place, extremely helpful. If those go away, it will be challenging for us. And when the administration came in and announced this current round of tariffs, we formed, in essence, a task force. And so it's a cross-functional team of people that are focused on the direct impact of tariffs, trade compliance, reports up into me. So my team is busy working on a lot of the work, focusing on retaliatory tariffs and availability of raw materials. We use some very unique raw materials like tungsten and molybdenum, which I didn't even know was a thing before a few months ago. And we are a physics-based company, and I'm not a science person. So, and so availability of raw materials. Some of the materials that we use, we only source from China, and they're on the China prohibited list. Indirect impact from suppliers. So the same impacts that we're having, our suppliers are also having, and we'll get that effect from them. And then what does it mean for our customers? So once a week, we all get together. We all have our separate work streams, but we get together and talk through these issues to make sure they're progressing. I also want to give a huge shout out to the World Trade Center. They have been invaluable in terms of advice and connections to our Congress people. And I would say, you heard the willingness to give feedback. We reached out to our Congress people and through Troy, and thank you, Troy, for this, and got support in a wide variety of actions that we've taken to date. So please rely on those connections. We are working with WTC with a new program that they have launched regarding foreign trade zones. If you haven't checked that out, it can be a huge resource as long as you have the systems in place to precisely track the materials that you would put into and then take out of that foreign trade zone. We are also working on duty drawback exemptions, both in the US and in China. So our trade team in China files for exemptions every time we ship a component from our manufacturing plant here over to China to be worked on and turned into a finished product in China. And then our trade team continuously looks at tariff engineering to see if there are things that we can do internally in terms of classification, country of origin, how we can we create, kits that can be further developed in a particular country. So we have separate work streams that are working on kind of all of those things. I mentioned raw materials. I think that for us is one of the larger issues, simply because some of the materials simply aren't available somewhere else. We have been working on diversifying our supply chain to the extent that we can. We have also pre-purchased in bulk a lot of materials. So for some materials, we now have a 5-year supply. And I would say, to the extent that you haven't looked at the raw materials, for those of you who have products for which this could be an issue, definitely look at that list and make sure that you put in place a plan to address what you're going to do if that supply goes away. So those are some of the things that we have worked on. In terms of how we're a public company, in terms of how the governance of tariffs rolls up to our board and things that we think of there, we report previously, we report to our audit committee on trade compliance, other compliance issues at least once a year, ad hoc as issues come up. I expect that for at least the next year, we will be reporting out to our board quarterly, in addition to ad hoc as things get put in place. So when our foreign trade zone is established, when duty drawback is approved, knock on wood, those reports will go out to the board. So beyond the management discussions, we do have discussions at our board level. We have a very active board that asks a lot of questions and provides some really good governance advice, and is very, very useful and dynamic in that respect. And if anyone wants to reach out separately and talk through some issues that we have dealt with, because we've dealt with a lot of them, I'm happy to connect with anyone offline.
Kim, thank you so much. I love everything you said, especially the intentionality that you've got this process with lots of people that have their assignments, and yet you're project managing it so the information flows all the way up to the board. I think that kind of shows how important the moment is, and how kind of being thoughtful and creating a process can be super helpful. Okay, Ben, one of the questions that just came in, actually, I think leads right into what you're going to talk about. There's a question about the specifics of reciprocal tariffs, and I'm not sure. I believe they mean the what Phil referred to, which is the executive order that in which the USTR is going to be analyzing trade imbalances around the world, and maybe having narrow or additional tariffs, or kind of who knows what that could lead to. Do you want to speak to that for a moment, and about, how World Trade Center is helping on that front, and in other ways as well?
Yeah, thanks, Troy. And I think the first thing I'd like to say is we understand as a company these things are coming in very fast and sometimes can be confusing. And the big call to action here is that we're a resource. I think you've heard that on a few fronts today. We're constantly monitoring what's coming through at the federal level and trying to break that down for companies. And one of those things is the recent Federal Register notice posted by USTR. If you haven't seen that, Jonathan sent out a mass email to people. So I would advise to check your emails, go back and look at those, make sure it has been filtered to spam. But essentially, USTR has a call to action right now in the Federal Register notice about unfair trade practices. So this is different, I should say, than looking at some of the tariffs that we're imposing at a federal level, but can be related as as it pertains to retaliatory tariffs. So essentially what USTR is trying to do is gather feedback on market access challenges abroad so that they can roll that information up on their negotiations in foreign countries. And so it's really important. We've talked about a few case studies in the past about how difficult it could be for a certain industry to have access, whether you're medical devices with the EU MDR sometimes, or if you are, natural products facing barriers into Mexico. We anticipate that this is going to be used to basically negotiate market access challenges like that abroad. And so, of course, there's a consideration as a company. You've got to weigh the comments are public, and so we would caution, think through that and think if you want to apply directly on the USTR site, or also reach out to us at World Trade Center Utah, and we're happy to collect information from you on your challenges abroad and put that into something that's anonymized so that you're not facing perhaps repercussions for a public posting for foreign partners or in a foreign country. And so, big call to action. If you haven't seen that, we'll make sure to get that back out to this group as well after this meeting so that you can see that posting. This is one of those things where everything's moving so fast right now. Typically, Federal Register notices are 60 days. This was put out with just over 2 weeks for a turnaround. So we're requiring on our side just to have some opportunity to compile this and put it into a standardized report to USTR. We need feedback by March 7th, and then USTR is closing comment on March 11th so that they can go start negotiating with that data in hand.
Ben, thank you so much. I think it's important for everyone to stay close to the emails from World Trade Center Utah. This stuff's moving fast, and opportunities like the one Ben just described to share what you're seeing and perhaps have this process benefit you to some extent, if possible. It's a great opportunity. A couple of the questions have come in on whether there are incentives that might be given to U.S. companies to kind of offset some of these issues. And I would open that up to everyone on our panel. Phil, you might have thought of this some as well. So I don't have in Ben and Kim, what you're seeing. Have you seen any potential regulatory incentives on the domestic side? Or investment or incentives that you think might be helpful in kind of lessening the blow, or at least offsetting it in some ways?
Can I take the FTZ here, Philip?
You bet.
I think, and I know Kim touched on this earlier as well. There's a joke at the national level that a lot of folks can't spell FTZ because it can be a little bit of a confusing tool sometimes, and we recognize that at World Trade Center Utah, and so one of the things that we've done is we've in-housed a specialist to help bring down those barriers to understanding the tool. So we have a resource here at World Trade Center Utah that can sit with you as a company and work through some questions about the FTZ. And so for those, we'll make sure we can do some post follow-up after this as well. But if you're interested at all, the email is ftz@wtcutah.com. And that goes to our specialist, Wayne Coleman, who will schedule a quick touch base on the tool and has all the information. And thank you. I see that we already posted it in the chat. But one thing, just touching on the FTZ, I caution sometimes that the FTZ is not necessarily a silver bullet to these tariffs. But I would say when we think through the exemptions of the new executive orders coming out, there are none. And so if you're looking for what is the only way to look at relief from these tariffs, the foreign trade zone program right now, as I understand it, is just that. Now, there are some limitations if you are going to have and not to get too technical here, but if you have a privileged good bringing it into the U.S. for U.S. domestic use, you're going to pay the tariff. But if you're re-exporting, that's where you're going to have potential savings on some of the tariffs, even if they're classified as privileged goods. And so maybe I'll stop there just to say it's a great tool. And one, under Jonathan's leadership, saw some urgency, saw some writing on the wall that these tariffs may become a bigger and bigger thing. So we worked with Salt Lake City to move that over to the World Trade Center Utah, provide some resources into it, and make it really usable for Utah companies.
Yeah, and I'll second that. Wayne is a great, great resource. He was really helpful in helping us sort through the nitty-gritty of what could and could not, what the requirements are and what benefit it would actually be. We do import for re-export, and so it can be a benefit, but we use, as I mentioned before, raw materials. Gold is one of them. We don't track the gold to the level of specificity that it would need to be tracked. So we're going to start with the FTZ for whole components like PCBs that come in and component by component are built in there versus raw materials that are used in part and parcel.
I would come at it on the other side of, we talked about concessions or any regulatory opportunities that we would have here in the United States. I have not bumped into them. Kim, maybe you've bumped into it in different areas, or Ben. I would say more on the other side and working with your regional factory groups. We've had some success there where, especially in China, they'll run with their regional governors to be able to say, look, we can work with you on concessions or cost down, if you want to say, within the commodity. Let's just talk about steel for us. And I could get a region that has my factory in it that if we pull that out, the job level goes way down in that town or that area. They're willing to potentially offset the cost of that steel. We're waiting to hear that. I mean, all of this is coming on so fast right now. They've done it in the past with machinery as far as zero interest or concession, or I would say consignment of that as well. So I deal with it more at the factory level of whatever country we are in, and leveraging that factory leader with that, I would say, government official or that steel partner or commodity partner. And that's where we kind of push back on that. So
Bill, that is a great insight. You just don't know unless you reach out and ask whether you're strategic to another country or, like you said, a locality. That's fantastic. Ben, Kim, thank you so much for those insights on the FTZ program and more broadly. We're at the top of the hour. I'm going to turn the time back over to Jonathan, and but just one last thank you to Kim, Phil, and Ben. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Troy, and I want to echo that. Thank you so much to Ben, Kim, Phil, Troy. Really great comments. I mean, I want everyone to know that this is why World Trade Center Utah exists, is to help you navigate uncertainties. We are a resource. We have tools in our toolkit that can help, and they are tailored to companies, to each company specifically. So please reach out to us. We are a nonprofit. We are here to help. I believe that we're going to maybe Ben or someone can give me the thumbs up if this is right. But I believe that if you did not receive the letter that I sent out a couple of days ago with the link to the U.S. Trade Representative's public comment, where you can give them feedback on how tariffs how this is going to specifically impact your business. Please let us know. But I think that we are posting that in the chat or attaching it to this webinar. But let me just give you, my email is jfriedman@wtcutah.com. Maybe someone could there. Thank you for putting that in the chat. For some reason, I can't message everyone. Only the panelists. So anyway, please reach out to us. We're here to help, as I said. As next steps, our plan is to compile. We've put out a survey over the last number of weeks and have received over 100 responses with specific case studies on how this will affect your business. We are compiling that in crafting a white paper that we'll be delivering to our federal delegation that they can use as talking points. They can say, Traeger, Varex Imaging, whatever, any company, they can use those in their talking points in the chamber with, inside conversations with other members of the federal delegation. I mean, this is powerful stuff. It really moves the needle, and it's important that we get them this information. So that is one next step. And then I also wanted to mention that once you see this link to post public comment on USTR's website, if there is something that's sensitive that you don't want to be public, but you want it to be known, we can post it for you and shield your company so that a competitor, for example, doesn't have access to some sensitive information that you don't want out there. Anyway, thank you so much. We're 5 minutes over. We're really appreciative and look forward to leaning in and helping you navigate these times.